Kids, welcome to the Far Out Podcast. It's currently sunny and 77, and I really appreciate you being with me here today. There is a lot that I want to talk about because it's been a minute since we've last gotten together. For a while there, I was doing pretty good about getting these episodes out on a weekly basis. That's never been a hard and fast rule, but I do really appreciate getting out, consistent episodes and stuff like that. So the last three, I think, were, one a week on the same day, so on and so forth. And then now this one's coming a little later just because I've had a lot of stuff going on and there's been a lot of things going on that I want to talk about. And so now I'm finally getting behind the mic to do just that. So strap in and get yourself a nice frosty beverage and sit back, relax, and enjoy. And I myself am going to open up a cold one, as you kids say. That one being, of course, a nice Dr. Pepper Zero. Please drink responsibly. Excuse me just a second. Yeah, so, okay, and there's a lot of things that I want to talk about. Some movie stuff, some video game stuff. But first, before we get into all that, we're going to start with some sports stuff because my Minnesota Twins are doing a baseball, as it were, and they are doing okay. My respective three teams that I really enjoy, that being the Twins, the Royals, Minnesota Twins, Kansas City Royals, and the Arizona Diamondbacks, they're all doing just okay the last time I checked. In fact, let me inquire about said records for the various teams. Let's see here. Doop-a-doop-a-doo. Taking a look at the Minnesota Twins, the Twinkies, as it were. They are 30-37, so not great at all. My Kansas City Royals are even worse, 27-39, and then my Diamondbacks are 34-31. So 2 out of the 3 are not winning. They do not have a positive record, and the Diamondbacks just slightly have a positive record. So that's real great. And yeah, there's been a bunch of things happening with all of the respective teams. The Diamondbacks, funny enough, they just signed my former favorite Twins player, Max Kepler, to a deal. And what's really funny and sad about that, just kind of confusing all at the same time, is that after Max Kepler left the Minnesota Twins, I think he got picked up by the Philadelphia Phillies, and then somewhere after he left the Twins, he did something very bad, and I believe he tested positive for some kind of steroid, some kind of performance-enhancing drug. Don't quote me on that because I don't know the exact specifics, but he did something he wasn't supposed to, I think with an illegal substance, and you yourself can go confirm the details and whatnot. But he got hit with a hefty suspension regarding baseball. I think he was, ordered by the MLB to miss like 80 or 90 games, which is like effectively like half the season, if not more, of a regular season. And so he was unsigned for quite a while. I think the Phillies kicked him out, and now I think as of earlier this month in June, and this is being recorded on June 9th, sometime earlier this month, he got picked up by the Diamondbacks. So good for Max Kepler, good for the Diamondbacks, and good for me to have him back in a quasi-rotation with me. I wish he was still with the Twins, and I wish he was still having a clean record, so to speak, because, I don't know why athletes feel that they have to do that and whatnot. So, yeah, my stock with him has dropped since he left the Twins, and now with all that's happening with him, and stuff like that, it's continuing to drop a little bit, but he was still my favorite player for the Twins, and he kind of helped make me a fan of the Twins, and so I do owe him, a tip of the cap, as it were. But yeah, his stock has fallen, as I said earlier, quite a bit with me. It's a bummer to see your quote unquote heroes or your sports idols, the people that you look up to see them fall from grace. But I hope that with this new team, that he gets kind of a fresh start for the remainder of his career, and that he he can bounce back one last time on a good foot and have a clean bill of health and do good and have fun playing baseball, and yeah, but who's not having fun playing baseball is the Kansas City Royals. As I said, they are not having the best time right now, and also I believe their star player, my favorite player on the Royals, Bobby Wood Jr. I think he left a game with some muscle tightness, I believe, in his leg. Again, don't quote me on this. You can go look up the details for yourself. But yeah, just as I was keeping track of my Twins and my Royals over the weekend because they did play each other recently, I do believe that Bobby Wood Jr. at some point kind of got tweaked and all that stuff, and so he's probably not doing real great. Which is, again, one more thing that the Royals have to deal with a somewhat bruised Bobby Witt Jr., a somewhat bruised star player. You got Aaron Judge for the Yankees, and you got Bobby Witt Jr. for the Royals. So yeah, not good for them to be losing personnel left and right. But what I really want to talk about is my Minnesota Twins, because they recently traded a player to the Baltimore Blue Jays. No, Baltimore. The Toronto Blue Jays. Excuse me. The Baltimore has a couple of birds. They got the Ravens and they got the Orioles. Toronto's got the Blue Jays. Pardon me. Excuse me. Yeah, the Twins made a trade to the Toronto Blue Jays. We traded Simeon Woods Richardson, who was a pitcher for us, SWR, and we simply got cash back in return for the trade. So yeah, we didn't even get a player out of the trade. We really just said, who wants him? Anyone? And Toronto said, well, here, we'll give you $50 or whatever. I don't know the exact particulars. But yeah, look, I'm not gonna say I was a huge SWR fan. I mean, I certainly wasn't. Not like I was with, say, Max Kepler. But Simeon Woods Richardson was on the team from 2022 to 2026, I believe, and so he's been with the team for quite a bit of the time I've been a fan of the Twins. I think I became a fan in either 2018 or 2019, and so I really just enjoyed seeing him in the rotation, in the lineup. I liked having him in the ball club, and it just kind of stinks to just have these quote unquote constants leave a team that you enjoy. Trades suck. They do. They come like a thief in the night. They happen at random. Of course, there's all this speculation and rumor about, could this happen? And there's fun to be had when talking about sports, whether it's baseball, basketball, football. There's fun to be had of, what could you give up to get this guy? What would you be willing to give up to hold on to this guy longer, because you might have a hot commodity. So there's absolutely fun to be had in trades as well. But man, just when one comes at random and just kind of just seems to kneecap you as a fan, boy, they sting and it lingers, in my opinion. And I'm worried about that for all of my sports teams. I mean, heck, I'm worried that the Vikings are going to make trades, the Wolves are going to make trades, the Twins are going to make more trades. I'm constantly in fear of that, because part of the reason why we get so attached to a certain team is a big part in the players. It might start out as simple as you accidentally just see the team on TV, which is honestly how I fell in love with the Twins. I just saw them on TV one day and I went, that's the one I want. Some people might get into it through like family history. You weren't ever really a big football fan, but maybe you grew up kind of half watching football with your dad, and then you latch on to the team that he's a fan of, stuff like that. This stuff is kind of both directly and indirectly, inherited, passed down, so to speak. And then I know people who honestly just choose a team based on colors. There are people who live in the Midwest, live in North Dakota, South Dakota, and whatnot, and they love the Steelers because they like their logo, or they like their colors, or like I said, they might like Baltimore because a raven is their favorite bird, so on and so forth. However, your fandom for a team or a sport in general starts, that's great. That gives it that personality that makes you want to watch the game on TV, or maybe go to a game and buy the merchandise and stuff like that. And so then to have a piece of that get removed, again, just at random via a trade, it just stinks. And that's what happened with Simeon Woods Richardson. He is now a Toronto Blue Jay. And yeah, it's just again, I'm not going to say I was ever a big fan of him, and in fact, when we did trade him, he was trending down, in my opinion. So, who knows what'll happen to him? Perhaps he will also have a bounce back with the Toronto Blue Jays, similar to how I hope Kepler has a bounce back with the Diamondbacks. Excuse me. I do think that at the time of this recording that he's made at least one start with Toronto, and I think he did pretty good. But yeah, well, that'll just remain to be seen. But yeah, just a bummer. Yeah. So soak up all the goodness that your favorite players or players bring to your respective teams, and yeah, even just kind of these tertiary pieces like a Simeon Woods Richardson, or maybe you really enjoy the kicker on a football team or a tight end. Just every now and then, just take a quick glance just to appreciate their presence. What's that quote from Ferris Bueller's Day Off? It's life moves pretty quick. If you don't stop to look at it every once in a while, you might miss it. Something like that. And that's true. That's sadly true. But yeah, and I can do another quote here. To quote oh, it's that comic strip with that kid and that tiger. It's don't smile or don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. Something like that. Um yeah, I don't know, but yeah, I'm kind of rambling here, but I just wanted to share my thoughts on the Twins and just sports in general. I do love me some baseball, but yeah, my favorite teams right now not doing so good, and so I am drinking this non-alcoholic beverage in a quasi sadness, so to speak. But hey, thanks for your time as a Twin. Go on and have fun in Toronto, and to Max Kepler, I hope you do well as a Diamondback. Calvin and Hobbes, kids. It was Calvin and Hobbes, that comic strip I was thinking of, the boy with his tiger. Yeah, don't don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. Now let's go exploring. Yes, of course. How could I forget? Well, thankfully the internet is here to answer all of my questions and whatnot. So thank you, Mr. and Mrs. Google. Appreciate that assist there. Anyway, moving on. The next thing I want to talk about, getting out of the world of sports, I want to get into the world of video games because there's been some cool stuff happening and there's been some fun stuff I've been partaking in. I got back into Helldivers recently, and I've been really enjoying dropping feet first into hell. There's a tease for what's coming later. But yeah, Helldivers 2 is a game that I've talked about over the lifetime of the podcast. And this game for me is pretty streaky. There's times I'm just in it and I'm just all about it and I'm playing it left and right and I'm just loving it. Then I don't touch it for like weeks or months. And that's what I did. I took a break for a couple of months and I just came back into it. And my gosh, is it a fun game? And it's super simple too. You drop down in this drop pod in this, rocket and whatnot, and boom, you just splash down onto an alien planet and you're just blowing up enemies left, right, and center. You're either using, machine guns, shotguns, pistols, but then of course the bread and the butter is calling in all this, or all this Gucci, equipment and whatnot, these orbital strikes and these, missile batteries and, all these cool things, walkers and tanks and all that stuff. It's awesome. And yeah, it's a really fun meat grinder game where you just, again, like you're gonna, if you know how to play the game like pretty consistently well, you're gonna literally kill hundreds of enemies each time. And yeah, everyone calling in explosions all the time is a lot of fun. Trying to get multi kills, see how many you can get, how many enemies you can get in one shot from an orbital strike, stuff like that. It's fun. It's fun, and it's pretty simple and pretty rewarding as a player. Because there's kind of an evolving story between the different factions. You've got the bugs, you've got the robots, you've got these other aliens as well, and it's just a really fun sci-fi shooting gallery. And to be honest, I'm not really sure why I ever put it down. Because it doesn't get boring for me. Yeah, the gameplay loop is this is gonna sound like a negative word, but I don't mean it that way. The gameplay loop is repetitive, but it's in a good way. It's like you're just constantly eating, you know, pudding or Oreos. It's just sugar. Now you can get overloaded with sugar, and perhaps that's why I took a break from it for a while. But now that I'm back into it, it's like, oh my gosh, we're going on to another planet to kill more enemies, and I get to call in cool orbital strikes, and we're gonna drop bombs on them while I hold down the trigger on my machine gun, like say no more, and then we're gonna go do that again and again and again. It's fun. It's fun. It's cool. So yeah, if you have not played Helldivers before, I do recommend that you pick it up. Or if you're like me, who has taken a break from the game, I recommend that you get back onto it because they just keep adding more stuff, and the story, the overarching themes are continuing to evolve, and they're continuing to put more armor pieces and guns and stuff into the game. So yeah, it's fun. So hopefully you can get back into it, or like I said, pick it up if you haven't already. And yeah, Helldivers 2 is really, really fun, and I'm very happy to be back on the front lines fighting for liberty and for Super Earth amongst my fellow Helldivers brethren. So yeah, I will see you planetside. All right, kids, moving on, but keeping it in the world of video games. When I was talking about Helldivers, I used the phraseology drop feet first into hell, which you think would work well with the Helldivers universe, and pardon my French as well, but there is hell in the verbiage and whatnot. But no, 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 no. Dropping feet first into hell is not a Helldivers thing, though again, that would work pretty seamlessly. It's actually a Halo thing because that has to do with ODSTs. And funny enough, as I'm talking about Halo right now and mentioning ODSTs, I am wearing my ODST branded hat because I'm in a Halo mood, because there's been a lot of Halo goodness that's been happening lately. And ODSTs stand for Orbital Drop Shock Troopers, and they also drop down into, alien worlds and whatnot via a drop pod. So yeah, I'm that kind of guy. I'm that kind of nerd, kids. I know acronyms and stuff for my favorite games and whatnot. And at one point, there's that Star Wars language called Arabesh, I believe, and I used to know how to read that. I mean, I was that kind of nerd too. But I digress. Anyway, kids, I do want to talk about Halo, and that being Halo 3. At least that's where we're going to start in terms of Halo, because GameStop, of all places, remember GameStop, kids? GameStop put up on Twitter earlier this month in June talking about how they were going to have a 1v1 challenge in Halo 3. And if you were to go to a GameStop in Texas, and if you were to play a quote-unquote GameStop Pro, so I assume it's a GameStop employee, you would walk out with a Halo 3 limited edition Xbox 360 console. What's not to like? All of this is just nostalgia into my veins. I mean, the idea that you're doing a Halo 1v1, boom. The idea that you're doing a Halo 1v1 in Halo 3, boom. The idea that it's at a GameStop, boom. And the idea that you get a limited edition Halo 3 Xbox 360, awesome. Awesome. Like, the Xbox 360 is, sadly, it's outdated hardware. It is now 2 generations removed from the current Xbox, So, it's not like you're playing a modern game to win a modern console. No, you're playing an older, fun game to win, an older console, which still looks great with that, nice dark green finish and that, kind of bronze, gold, orangey finish to it. I think it's amazing. And I tell you what, if I had the ability to, I would have flown to Texas to do this. I'm not even kidding. I live in North Dakota. I would have just flown or drove in a straight line from North Dakota to Texas, and I would have gone there and I would have done my best to win that console. And look, I love Halo. Halo's my jam. It's my favorite game series. I'm a super nerd when it comes to this stuff. I played all the games. I've read a lot of the books. I'm in deep on the Halo universe. That being said, Halo 3 is one that I've had to pick up now in the past. I wasn't there for Prime Halo 3. My first Halo game, my real proper introduction was Halo Reach. Well, I mean, technically I did play the original trilogy with my dad when I was like 7, 8, 9, stuff like that. But really the first one that I like consciously, latched on to, the game that I knew inside out was Halo Reach. That was my first Xbox Live experience. That was really where I began to fall in love with the series and learn about it and become this big, super fan that knows all the stuff about it. But having since grown up with the series, I've gone back to play the original trilogy, that of course including Halo 3. And Halo 3 is one of the best games ever made, in my opinion, arguably the best of the Halo franchise. That being said, I still play Halo 3 multiplayer, but I'm not the best at it. Halo Reach, I can clean up. Halo Infinite, I can clean up. Halo 3, I don't know. It's a different breed of shooter. So I'm not saying I would have had this in the bag. If I would have played this GameStop Pro for a 1v1 on Halo 3, I'm not saying I'd have it in the bag. Though I'm also not a slouch either. I did hop onto Halo 3 via the Master Chief Collection, and I played some multiplayer just to kind of just see how it feels, get my feet wet for the environment. I did pretty well. It wasn't a 1v1, it was Team Slayer, but still, I picked it up pretty quickly, just like I've done before. It's like riding a bike. Even if I don't touch a Halo game for a bit, I can still pick up a controller and go, I know what to do with this, what to do with that. I know this gun does this best thing with this thing. I know this grenade will do this with that. Like, I still got the goods. So I would have loved to have tried my hand at a Halo 3 1v1 to win this console. So yeah, it's just cool to see Halo just be talked about, to be circulating. And yeah, I just mentioned that like I'm all in on Helldivers again, but like, I've left Helldivers before. I've taken breaks from it. I cannot take breaks from Halo. There's no way. You can't separate Halo from me. Like I'm always playing and I'm always wanting to consume more of it. And so yeah, just the idea that I would have gotten a chance to go back into one of the classic games to win a classic console, I think that would have been a lot of fun. So yeah, whoever did participate in this, I hope that they won. I hope that they got that console. And yeah, kids, just play Halo, because fun doesn't die; it just ages. And boy, is that sure a seamless segue into some other Halo stuff that I want to talk about. Because while I'm talking about Halo 3, we have to go back even further now, because I want to talk about Halo 1. Funny enough, we have to go back to the future when it comes to Halo 1, because Halo 1, the game that started it all, Halo Combat Evolved, is getting remade, and it is now called Halo Campaign Evolved. And this is not a remaster, it is a full remake, combining assets from the original game from 2001 and Halo Infinite from 2020, 2021, 2022 when that game came out. And it's also being ran on the Halo Reach engine, I believe, or at least a modified version of Halo Reach's engine, I think. So yeah, Halo Campaign Evolved is a remake of the first Halo game, but it's sampling bits and pieces from all other Halo games. And this, oh, I'm so excited for this. There have been new trailers released for this game, and it is looking so freaking awesome. Okay, so first off, as I said, this is a remake of the first Halo game, but it is truly an evolution of that game, because, with the first game coming out in the series, you're not going to have all the enemies, you're not going to have all the guns, you're not going to have all this stuff, because it was the first one. It's like, why don't we see clone troopers in the first Star Wars movie? Well, because they hadn't been shown yet. They hadn't been invented yet. Same with battle droids and stuff like that. You have to, as things progress and move on, you're going to get evolutions into, into the mythology and whatnot. And so now that they're redoing Halo 1, they can add in stuff that wasn't previously available when the game first came out in 2001. So in this Halo 1 remake, there's going to be guns from Halo 2, such as the SMG. There's going to be guns from Halo Reach, such as the Needler rifle. There's going to be enemies that more so or less resemble their appearances in Halo Infinite, which is the latest entry in the franchise. So it's taking this classic game from 2001 and modernizing it in terms of graphics, in terms of fidelity. And they're retelling the story with some tweaks here and there, but they're adding a fresh coat of paint to it, and they're adding more tools and toys to the sandbox, and I couldn't be happier. I am so in on this, and Halo Campaign Evolve comes out this July, meaning it is so freaking close. At first, there was this idea that it was going to release around November to honor the release of the first game when it came out originally in 2001. They were going to do this for the 25th anniversary, but unfortunately, it appears that Grand Theft Auto 6 is releasing in November as well, and so Halo is still a big franchise, but they do not want to get steamrolled by Grand Theft Auto 6, so they decided to back it up, or should I say, move up the release to July. So this game is really, really close. And I can't wait for this. I love the trailers. I love the idea that we're going to get to revisit a classic game with a fresh coat of paint on it, try out these new guns and all this stuff. And in addition to retelling the original story with new graphics and, smaller tweaks here and there, maybe different pieces of dialogue, different camera angles and stuff like that, they're also adding in new missions. They're actually telling a prequel story as well to the original game. They're going to include, the company's going to include 3 new missions set 1 year before the original Halo game. So Master Chief is going to have a whole new set of armor, and we're all going to get to see things we haven't previously known about. Perhaps these things have been alluded to in a book or in other little bits of dialogue throughout the games, but we're now going to get new missions to play in Halo 1, because this is, again, taking the campaign, taking the game, and evolving it into a much bigger thing. And I couldn't be happier. I love the fact that fans, old and new, are going to get to experience Halo 1 all over again. For myself, this is going to be nostalgia filled while also having a sense of newness and a sense of freshness and wanting to explore what's old, what's new, and to, revisit things and discover things. But then there's also this appeal to new fans who perhaps this will be their first Halo game. Perhaps this will be the proper introduction to the franchise, and then maybe after they play this remake of Halo 1, maybe they go back and they play the original version of Halo 1, then they play the original Halo 2 and the original Halo 3, and maybe they fall into it the same way I fell into it with Halo Reach. Maybe this game, maybe Campaign Evolved can be someone's Halo Reach, and if this game can make new Halo fans, then what's not to like? I mean, I want my favorite franchise to continue on. I want it to grow. I want it to evolve. I want it to spread. I want people to enjoy playing Halo, so that way, I can continue to play Halo. I can continue to play multiplayer. And then, eventually, when I, have a family, Lord willing, I want to pass along these games as well. And I want to give my kids the original copy of Halo 1. Then I'll give them the Campaign Evolved evolution. Then we can play them together and we can compare and contrast. Like, I love that this game is existing in the legacy of Halo. And again, with this coming on the 25th anniversary of the franchise, I think is really great. And now, I have memories of playing the original Halo with my dad, doing, couch co-op split screen. We can do that again with Halo Campaign Evolved. And now there's online multiplayer, so now you can experience this story with friends where, when you're not in the same room and whatnot. Like, I think all of this is great. I think it looks great. I think it sounds great. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. At the end of the day, this needs to be fun, and it appears to be fun. I like the gameplay. I like the story trailers. I like the sense of gravitas that is being treated with this. I just, everything about this I'm enjoying. The only thing that I don't like, and even that has an asterisk to it, because I'm not sure in the full context how I'm going to feel about it. a lot of the voice actors appears to have returned to their original roles. The original voice of Master Chief is still Master Chief in this remake of Halo 1. The original voice of Cortana is still the voice of Cortana in this remake of Halo 1. But there is a Marine, a Sergeant Johnson, as it were, who maybe it could be the same guy. I don't know, but I just my instincts tell me that this is a different voice actor because when I listened to the new trailers, when I watched the new trailers, I thought he sounds close to Johnson, but he doesn't sound like the original Johnson. So did they get a different voice actor from the guy that did it back in 2001? I don't know. I honestly don't know. Maybe it's already confirmed. Maybe I could just Google it and find out. But, I find it odd that for some of the characters, they would get back the originals, but then for others, they wouldn't. I don't know why you would pick and choose, and maybe they offered the original voice actor to come back and said, hey, we're doing Halo 1 again. Do you want to come back? And perhaps the original Sergeant Johnson said, no, I don't want to. And if he does, or if he did, that's a bummer for me as a fan, but like you can't force someone, to do this. Maybe he already feels he put his creative stamp on it. I don't know. I don't know why he would have been left out. I can't imagine that the studio again would be picky choosy of get that guy, not him, get her, not her. I don't know why they would do that. Or for all I know, it could be the original voice actor and he just sounds different because it's been 25 years, so maybe I'm getting, maybe I'm thinking about this too deeply. Maybe I'm thinking about nothing in the end game here. I don't know. But that's my only gripe is that everything looks and sounds pretty similar. And I like that a lot of the sounds have been beefed up and kind of amplified in terms of their reintroduction to the franchise. I'll just say, though, I know what Sergeant Johnson looks and sounds like. And they're different. The look, not so much, but the sound of him is different from what I've known for years and years and years. So again, I don't know why they would maybe get someone else. But, look, if, for all I know, it's not someone else. But even if it is someone different, even if there is an entirely new voice actor for Sergeant Johnson, again, that's okay because this is a remake of the game. It's meant to be an extension of what previously existed, not a one-for-one copy, not a remaster. It's meant to be a remake, just using different tools and stuff like that. So I'm not gonna, it's not like I'm gonna pass on the game now because they might have different voice actors. No, absolutely not. I like people. I like it when people bring their own creative spin to things, and that way they keep things fresh and new and exciting and enticing for fans, new and old. So yeah, that's my only gripe, air quotes gripe, with the game. Otherwise, though, I can't wait. And just look at Master Chief. Look at him. Look at how good he looks with that pistol, that Magnum there. That is the problem solver of Halo 1. If you've ever played Halo 1 before, kids, you know how strong that gun is, okay? Forget the assault rifle, forget the rocket launcher, forget the sniper rifle. That thing is your multi-tool, okay? You can 3-shot enemies, no problem. That thing is a hand cannon, so much so that in Halo games onward, they have severely altered its power, so it is not as much of a just cudgel as it was in the first game. It is now much more of a sidearm, more of a quick, I need a gun right now type of tool in Halo, 2, 3, 4, and so on. Same is also said with Halo Infinite. But in the first Halo game, when they were still figuring this stuff out, they made that thing pack a punch. And I cannot wait to have that brought back into my life, and so I can just go out there and just storm across the ring world that is Halo as a new Master Chief and just pop fools with the Magnum. And also, not for nothing, but this armor that Master Chief is wearing right now, this is the Mark V version of his armor. Again, I'm that much of a nerd that I know the different armor variations he wears throughout his history. By the way, in the prequel missions that are being added to Campaign Evolved, he's going to wear the Mark IV armor, which does look different, which is different from the Mark V. Again, I'm that guy. And then going forward beyond Halo 5, going forward beyond Halo 1, he has the Mark VI armor. Again, I'm that kind of nerd, but I digress. The the Mark 5 armor that he wears in Halo 1 is my favorite armor that he's worn. It's my personal favorite. I have little standees of him. I like in that armor. I love the look of Master Chief, and so for Master Chief to get a fresh coat of paint, love it. But for the armor that I most appreciate him in, I think it's great. And look, like I like all the armors that he's had, save for like Halo 4 and 5. I've kind of learned to love those, but whatever. But the Halo 1 armor holds a real special place in my heart. And so again, for it to, get a makeover, for it to be, glossed up, I think is awesome. And I cannot wait for this game. And I won't have to wait very long either. Because again, it comes out in July, and watching these trailers and seeing the game on display, it made me tear up. It really did, because I'm getting to revisit something old, but have it feel fresh again. And I have no shame in saying that. They did make me tear up. I love Halo so much, and I love this game so much, and I can't wait to experience Halo 1 all over again. And yeah, fun does not die. It just ages. And soon we're all going to get to drop on the ring again. And for fans who are doing it for the first time, welcome. Prepare to drop onto the ring. Prepare to have your socks blown off. Prepare to enter a world that is mysterious and fun and exciting. And yeah, I just can't wait. Halo Campaign Evolved arrives to Xbox, PlayStation 2, and various other platforms in July, and I can't wait. Yeah, just play Halo, man. This is a fun game, and I just can't wait. Kids, the truth is, I forgot something. When I was talking about sports earlier, talking about the baseball, I also forgot to talk about the basketball, because just recently my Minnesota Timberwolves have redesigned their logo, and they have revealed it to the public. They have revealed their updated logo for 2026 and beyond. And look, it's nothing crazy. It's not like, they're getting in a different animal or they're changing the colors up completely. On the contrary, it's more or less combining the current Timberwolves logo from 2017 to 2026, and is combining it with the 89 logo that lasted into the mid 90s. And so it's kind of that same design, that same kind of circular pattern, same kind of wolf pattern, but with the classic 80s and 90s colors. And I really like it. I think it's cool. I really like this new logo. I think it's going to sell great. And I'm of course gonna probably have to get some new merch now. Oh no, whatever will I do? But yeah, I'm not the biggest basketball fan, but the Timberwolves are my team, and I've seen them play, live. I've gone to a few games, and I was hoping that we would make, a decent playoff run, but we were dealing with a lot of injuries just this last season, and so we did get eliminated pretty quick. But look, I'm looking forward to the future now, and now that we're getting a new logo, I think that signifies perhaps maybe change is coming in a big bad way. I'm not saying we're gonna, lose a lot of players, or we're gonna, get a new coach or anything like that. But I mean, heck, the Timberwolves have been talking about getting a new stadium, playing on a new court and whatnot, not just like, remaking their existing court, refurbishing it, but like actually there's been talk about them getting an entirely new building to play in, so I haven't heard anything about that. But, as you can see here from this chart, a Timberwolves logo lasts for frankly a decade plus. You're going on an average of about 15 years, I'd say. So I think over the course of this logo's lifetime, say from 2030 or 2026 into 2036, I think by then we'll have a new stadium, and of course the roster will change and whatnot. But I think that this is cool. I like the new logo. Again, I like the combination of the mid 2020s design with the mid 1990s design. So I think it's cool, and I'm all in on it. And yeah, just I forgot to mention this while I was covering sports earlier, but yeah. Anyway, go Wolves, and yeah, it's cool to see a new logo. Once again, they're gonna get all my money because now, like I said, I gotta buy new stuff with the new logo. But you know what? That's a good problem to have. So I say, yeah, bring it on. I like this logo. All right, kids. Moving along with our regularly scheduled program, I saw a movie recently and I loved it. In fact, I loved it so much that I've seen it twice now at the time of this recording. And I'm talking about the new movie called Backrooms. And yeah, kids, look, if you've listened to the podcast before or if you know anything about me, I am not a scary movie guy like at all. I mean, we're talking one out of every 50, one out of every 100 scary movies that come out. Do I actually watch them and, flip a coin on if I'm going to like it or not? Scary stuff, horror is not my cup of tea. Thrillers are, suspense movies are, but I mean, it is rare that I like scary movies. Something like A Quiet Place has been kind of the latest one to really grab me. But before that, it was, Alien and Terminator. And even those are kind of loose, scary movies because, they're, you could call them more kind of sci fi oriented first. Bottom line is, scary stuff is not my cup of tea, like at all. But this movie is the exception. It is the one in 50. It is the one in 100. Excuse me, I just burped. I really enjoyed the Backrooms movie. I think this thing is awesome. And look, even the whole concept of the Backrooms, the idea of these continuous liminal spaces, these environments that look familiar and inviting and curious, yet also are unsettling. I'm being for real. I enjoy this kind of art. I enjoy this aesthetic. I like this kind of world building. For me, it is all those things I just said. It makes me curious and it makes me want to explore, but I know there's something potentially lurking around every corner. But that in of itself makes me want to explore. And so when this movie was announced, I mean, I really feel like it was made for me, so to speak. It appealed to that scary sensibility that I kind of honestly like when most of the time I don't like being scared, as I just previously said. But I was a little worried about this movie going into it because the trailers presented the Backrooms as a place you could both enter and exit freely. That or you were maybe perhaps guided toward an entrance or an exit. And from what I know of the Backrooms prior to seeing this movie is that, once you're in, you're kind of in. You accidentally get in and then you are just prey. You are to be consumed. That was the idea that I had in my mind about what the Backrooms is. It's a place you're not meant to go to. And if you are in there, if you find yourself in there, you're in for a rough time. So this movie, kind of, quasi spoiler, it expands that mythology and it presents the Backrooms as a place that you can exit and enter honestly at will. And this won't be an open spoiler discussion, but I'll be talking about things in kind of a larger context as I just did just now. So if you don't want to know any details about the movie, skip ahead, don't listen to this, or go see the movie, then come back and listen to this. But I will be talking about the movie in a very open-like fashion. So if you don't want to know any details, then I recommend you listen to another segment at some point. But speaking on the movie now, at the very tail end of the movie, um, we're shown this group of individuals, this organization, part of the U.S. government, or at least funded in part by the U.S. government, and they're describing how they've been going in and out of the back rooms and how doors to the back rooms are opening up all over the place. They're just kind of appearing at random. Hence how we follow this movie. or how we follow the characters in this movie, because the movie takes place, the door to the Backrooms was opened up in a furniture store. That's where this ripple in time, this ripple in the dimension, so to speak, exists. And so that I found interesting, is that they're presenting the Backrooms as a wide event, that people from everywhere are going to be experiencing this at some point. I also like the fact that they made the Backrooms kind of evolve as well. They presented the idea that it can make things, and that it can make copies of things but not get them quite right, which makes them really unsettling. And they also don't really answer a lot of questions either. They don't give a whole lot of information about what the Backrooms is, where it comes from, why it exists in the first place, nor do they provide a lot of background on the actual organization that is trying to investigate the Backrooms. Much like the characters in this movie, we as the audience don't really know what's going on. And I think that that works really well with the tone of the movie. I found this thing to be interesting and scary at times too, but not overly done. I thought that for someone like myself, who again doesn't like scary stuff, this was right up my alley of being a really unique, really cool take on a type of genre or a subgenre, while making me feel tense but not grossing me out on a lot of things. I just really enjoyed it, and I like, again, that they present a lot of different kernels of information to you about the world of the Backrooms, yet they answer almost none of them, and that's going to lead to further exploration, whether that's in another movie, in a sequel, or even just as you're leaving the theater, much like I did both times, to where I was, talking with the people I saw it with afterwards, where I was like, what does this mean? What does that mean? What could this mean? What could that mean? It just made for a really, really fun time at the movies. And yeah, I really, really like this movie. I could see myself getting it on DVD. I think I will want to add it to my collection. And it is one that I want to learn more about from a literal production standpoint, because I find the the way it was lit and structured from a literal set, building, uh, you know, purpose. I think it was really, really interesting to see. And so, yeah, the Backrooms, I think, I think it's a really, really good movie. I think it touches on a lot of different genres and tones and themes, and I think it's all done to perfection. If you haven't seen the movie, I do recommend it. Even if you're not a scary fan like myself, if you're someone who's very much on the edge of seeing it because you don't want to be scared, you're gonna get creeped out. There's no doubt about it. You will get creeped out, and if you're claustrophobic, yeah, I can't recommend this one. But if you're someone who is, kind of cautiously curious about it, I think you'll enjoy it if you decide to check it out. So yeah, I love this movie. I think it's one of the better ones I've seen all year. And yeah, I can't wait to watch it again, whether that's in theaters, on Blu-ray, and whatnot. But yeah, the Backrooms movie is a gift that keeps on giving, and I can't wait to revisit it at some point. So yeah, I'm kind of looking forward to getting lost in the Backrooms myself, which maybe that sounds creepy in its own right, but yeah, it's such a cool movie. So yeah, I hope you guys decide to check it out. Kids, we just got done talking about the Backrooms movie, which is produced and released by the production company called A24. And now I want to talk about another movie that they have coming out soon. This one is called Primetime. And this movie also is kind of in a similar ish vibe for me when it comes to Backrooms, because Backrooms is something that's scary yet curious, which makes me want to watch it. The same is also for this movie as well, because the trailer for Primetime presents it as a kind of scary, suspenseful thriller, yet I want to watch it. It looks so freaking cool. This movie is about the television host known as Chris Hansen, and if you are not familiar with his name, you should know at least of his work, and he's most notably known for the TV show Call to Catch. a Predator. And so Robert Pattinson in the movie Primetime plays Chris Hansen. And in this movie, it follows the origins of the TV show, or it at least follows Chris Hansen throughout his television tenure. There isn't a real full synopsis for this movie, I don't think. I'm not even sure if it has a release date yet. But yeah, it's going to follow Chris Hansen as he is either building in the prime, pun intended, of To Catch a Predator, or perhaps on the downward trend of To Catch a Predator as well, because I don't believe that show is on the air anymore. But yeah, Chris Hansen is, he's, in my opinion, he's pretty well known, and so I think that he has a story that's worth telling, and I think that the whole concept of, To Catch a Predator, I think, is something that should be revisited and told for audiences who perhaps, again, as I said, don't know who Chris Hansen was, don't know what that show was. And so the idea that this movie is now going to tell us either part of that story or a version of this story, I think is really interesting. And the trailer, I think, is really unsettling. If you're a fan of television and of the production of television, and just kind of that old kind of, you know late 90s, mid 2000s, esque presentation of television, I just think that this looks aesthetically really cool. And yeah, it's going to be one of those movies where I think it might be a little bit of a tough watch just with the subject matter, but I think it's going to also be important. I think it's going to be entertaining as well. And so yeah, the prime time trailer played during the Backrooms movie, or before it, excuse me. And yeah, just those two tones, they just kind of existed seamlessly for me. And I can't wait to watch this movie. I love Robert Pattinson as an actor. Like I said earlier, I love the idea of this movie. And yeah, I can't wait to see this one. It is scheduled for a 2026 release, so it will come out at some point in this calendar year. But yeah, there isn't a real full synopsis, nor is there a real ironclad release date as well. But yeah, Prime Time, starring Robert Pattinson as Chris Hansen, the host of To Catch a Predator, is coming to theaters soon. Moving on, but keeping it still with A24, there is another movie they have coming out called Onslaught. And much like Primetime, I'm not fully sure what this movie is about, but judging by the cool trailer, and this trailer is freaking sweet, it appears that there are maybe genetically engineered super soldiers, or at least just quasi soldiers who have a particular set of skills. Maybe the trailer presents, there's this unit of soldiers, these combatants, who are described as the human equivalent of a heat-seeking missile, and they have glowing eyes, whether that's some kind of genetic modification, whether they're just wearing trippy contact lenses to hide their identities, whether they have some really cool night vision capabilities, who knows? But in this movie, Onslaught, the overall premise that I could gather from the trailer is that there's this group of soldiers, whether it's two, three, four, or 50 of them, and they are designed to be an unstoppable killing machine. And not just for, Joe Schmo, bad guy and whatnot. It says in the trailer that they were designed to be deployed against the domestic populace. So they were just meant to be dropped into a a densely populated area and just go at it. And so it appears that in the trailer here, the premise is more or less that they get loose or they get deployed, and it's this fight for survival. And I think it looks sweet. I think that the actual soldiers themselves, again with their glowing eyes, look cool. I think the action looks cool. I like the tone of it. I think it's going to be a fun time at the movies. And I'm not a big A24 fan, but they're really going on a streak right now with me. I find them to be a pretty weird and artsy dartsy, production company. That being said, though, if they can make something that has more kind of broad appeal as opposed to something that's just straight horror or something really niche, then that's great. And movies like Backrooms, Primetime, Onslaught, they are getting people like myself who are not necessarily in love with the idea of something super scary or super gross out to the movies. And I think that that's really cool. And so, yeah, Onslaught looks to be another interesting, curious, maybe I'll get bit because I'm so curious kind of movie, similar to Backroom, similar to Primetime. And yeah, I can't wait for this one either. So keep an eye out for Onslaught when it comes out to theaters later this year. And I've got one more movie trailer that I want to talk to y'all about. This one is one that I didn't know existed. I didn't know this movie existed until I saw it in the theaters for, I think it was when I saw The Mandalorian and Grogu with my mom. Shout out to my mom if you're listening, and I know that you are. Hi, Mom. This movie is called The Dog Stars, which is already kind of a weird title for a movie. And I don't know how the title coincides with the actual story of the movie itself. And kind of the theme of all the trailers I've been talking about is that I don't really know the full synopsis for any of the movies I'm talking about, at least in terms of their trailer. They're presenting us, appetizers to the story, so to speak. And same with this one as well. The Dog Stars simply appears to be a apocalypse survival movie. And I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, that's a really simple thing on paper. What's getting me interested is that I thought the trailer was cool when I saw it in the theater, and it's directed by Ridley Scott, who is the director of such movies as Gladiator, The Martian, Napoleon. I think he's a really good director. I don't like everything he's done that I've seen, but the majority of the movies I've seen by him, I think are really, really good, if not outright exceptional. Excuse me. And so I am looking forward to now seeing this movie. It's not very high on my list, but I think when it comes out, if I happen to have some free time and whatnot, I think I think I will go check that one out. I like the trailer; it looked cool, and I don't really know what kind of apocalypse they're surviving in this movie. It appears that it's zombies, maybe, or more so like a rabid type of human. It looked like maybe the human survivors weren't totally lost. They were just more feral, more animalistic. So, yeah, I'm not really sure what the actual overall premise of this movie is beyond just surviving some kind of what appears to be biological apocalypse. But the reason why I'm really interested in it is for one of the leads is Josh Brolin, who is from Dune. He's also the voice of Thanos in the Marvel movies. But really, the name that got me interested was Ridley Scott. When I saw Ridley Scott's name flash up on the screen, directed by Ridley Scott, I was like, oh, okay, like we might be in for something. So yeah, the Dog Stars looks cool, cool-ish, I should say. And it releases in August, and I'm definitely going to keep my eye out for this one. Not saying I'm necessarily running to the theater like I would be for, say, a prime time, but yeah, I think this one looks kind of cool, and so I think you should keep your eye out on it, and yeah, just check out the trailer if you're interested. But yeah, Ridley Scott has a new movie coming out later this year in August. That's always something to at least give a glancing look at whenever he has a movie coming out, because the last one he did, I think the last one he did was Napoleon. Anyway, the last one I saw of his was Napoleon, and or was that Gladiator 2? Anyway, I'm fragmenting myself off of my own point. Napoleon, Gladiator 2, whatever movie came last, I saw them both. I really liked them, and his newest movie called The Dog Stars is coming out later this year, and yeah, I think it could be good. All right, kids, the next trailer I want to talk about is not for a movie, but rather it's for a TV show, a TV series, as it were, kids. And I'm talking about the new HBO Max series titled Lanterns, as in the Green Lanterns, because yes, there is a TV show about the Green Lantern Corps coming to HBO Max later this year in August, I believe, and they've had their second trailer, and I thought it looked super cool. If you've listened to the podcast previously, you'll know that I'm all in on DC and what they're doing. In fact, I'll talk a little more about DC and DC Studios a little later in the show. But yeah, I'm all in on the new DC slate of stuff, beginning with Superman, and we got Supergirl coming, and we've got follow up to Superman titled Man of Tomorrow, which I think looks really cool. And yeah, DC is firing on all cylinders, in my opinion. And this is going to be their first live action TV show to exist inside of the same universe, the same storytelling device as the Superman movie, as the Supergirl movie, and this is centered on Green Lanterns. And this TV show looks to be really serious and mature in nature, which I think is cool. I think that's going to be a good juxtaposition to Green Lanterns, because Green Lanterns as a superhero are a little more on the goofy side, but their powers are super cool. The fact that they can fly, create constructs with their mind out of the Green Lantern power ring, I think that's really cool. But they're presenting this story as a much more grounded approach, much more of a space cops trying to solve crimes type of thing. It's also R-rated because there's going to be some swearing and some probably some good violence and whatnot. I could use without the swearing, but again, they're going for that more mature and adult tone. I think that's cool. We're also getting Hal Jordan as a Green Lantern and Jon Stewart as a Green Lantern, and so that's pretty cool as well. For myself, I grew up on Jon Stewart's Green Lantern. That was my iteration of him, and then I know people also really like the character of Hal Jordan as Green Lantern as well too. So we're getting both flavors essentially, which I think is really, really cool. And I'm really looking forward to this one. Even though again, it's probably more adult than I would take it in terms of tone and whatnot. But again, I'm not making the show. I'm just going to consume it and all that stuff. I will say though, the last TV show that DC did was Creature Commandos, and I only checked that one out because that was the very, very first thing that came out of this new DC universe slate of movies and TV and stuff that actually came out before Superman. Didn't really connect to Superman. There was just a little bit of, it kind of laid the groundwork for some stuff. There was a few characters that overswapped and stuff like that. I fell out of that show as it went along because, again, it was too adult for me to handle. It just kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I just thought it was too icky. So I'm hoping this one isn't, because I love the character of Green Lantern. So does my mom. Again, shout out my mom. We also really like the Green Lantern character as well. And yes, I'm hoping this one is much more palatable as opposed to Creature Commandos. But again, I like the trailer. I like the cast. I like the tone. I think it's cool. Everything I've seen thus far is cool. Both trailers have been cool. So yeah, Lanterns comes to the small screen, HBO Max, later in August. And I think that's pretty cool. Kids, welcome back to the Far Out Podcast. At least it's a return for myself, because I actually had to record this episode over the course of 2 days. I had to take a break in between the majority of the episode and now this last segment, because I had to do some additional research on the topic that I want to discuss and the one that I want to close out the show with, that being the upcoming Supergirl movie, because at the time of this recording, it is now June 10th. We are just over 2 weeks away from Supergirl coming to theaters. We are just 16 days away at the time of this recording, which is pretty crazy, to be honest, because I remember when James Gunn, the head of DC Studios, he announced, a year plus ago, just this big slate of movies and TV shows, and one of them was Supergirl, which at the time had the title of Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. So it had the main title, Supergirl, then it had the subtitle, Woman of Tomorrow. And that's because the movie was set to be a direct, air quotes, direct adaptation of a miniseries of Supergirl comics of the same name. There is a miniseries, an 8-issue miniseries of Supergirl titled Supergirl Woman of Tomorrow. And after the movie was announced, I picked up that comic, I picked up that miniseries, and I have that in my collection. And I read it kind of sparingly over the year and whatnot, and I thumbed through it and I looked at the art, and but it never really grabbed me. But I told myself I got it because of the movie, and I want to watch it, and I want to read it before I see the movie, so that way I have a better understanding of what's gonna, be the story and the themes and the tone and whatnot when I go see the movie in theaters. And now, kids, with just over 2 weeks to go until the movie releases, I have finished the miniseries Woman of Tomorrow. And so I want to talk about the comic, where I think it might, line up with the movie, where I think it might differ, what I think the rollout of the movie has been thus far, where I think the movie will go, so on and so forth. So yeah, we're gonna talk about Supergirl in many different facets. And what's interesting is that the first movie to come out of the new DC universe, when James Gunn announced that slate way back when, he announced we're doing, a Superman movie, we're doing a Supergirl movie, we're doing a Clayface movie, we're doing a this and a that, but the order wasn't fully set. There's been some shifting pieces, and some projects have been canceled, some projects have been pushed on the back burner. Well, Supergirl, again, formerly titled Woman of Tomorrow, was going to come out a little later in the lineup of DC movies, but just because the script was said to have been so good and production was going so smoothly, they moved that thing up in the release order of DC movies. So while it might not have been intended as the initial chapter 2 of the new DC movie universe, and including TV shows as well, it is now. And so it's just interesting that in 2025 we had the Superman movie with David Cornsweet. We now have Supergirl, starring Millie Alcock, I think is her name. I'm not familiar with her as an actress. I just know that she's from Game of Thrones, which, just being for real, I've never seen Game of Thrones. I have really no desire to watch it, but I know that people love that franchise, and she's a part of it in one way or another. So she has some stardom coming into the Supergirl role. So we have Superman in 2025, Supergirl in 2026, and then in 2027, funny enough, we have Man of Tomorrow, which is set to be a sequel to the previous Superman movie. And also, speaking of that, and James Gunn, the director and writer and the head of the DC studios over there, he released this image of Lex Luthor inside what will be his Kryptonian power armor, so that way, instead of just being a intellectual villain to Superman, he's actually going to get his hands down and dirty. And in the comics and in various other adaptations of the characters, Lex Luthor has fashioned the super suit so that way he can go, hand to hand with Superman. So the fact that this is coming to the movies, and the fact that this is a real legitimate suit, is crazy. I love the look of it. I love the size of it. Of course, they're going to touch it up with CG and make it more nimble and stuff like that. Very similar to the Iron Man suit over the course of its lifetime in the Marvel movies. I believe the majority of that suit was built practically for the first couple of movies. Then just as the scenes got bigger, the action got more bombastic, they kind of phased out the practical suit and, really more so relied on CG, which, in my opinion, for Iron Man, that kind of diminished the returns, because I love the tactile, feel to that suit. I love the literal weight. I like the sense of damage it can take. And so the fact that Superman, or Man of Tomorrow, I should say, is at least starting with a practical suit for its villain, I think is really, really cool. And I really like this suit design. I think it looks great. And yeah, just seeing these behind the scenes images, these making of images, just reinforced that this is not only a real movie, it's being shot right now as we're speaking, but that the universe is alive and well. Because again, we had Superman in 2025, Supergirl in 2026. We have Lanterns coming out as well, to be the first, live action TV show. We got Man of Tomorrow, we got Clayface. We have all these great movies and TV shows coming out, and just the idea that the engine is moving along at a steady clip. I really like that as a fan. Excuse me just for a second, kids, while I crack open my my second Dr. Pepper that I'm going to be drinking over the course of this podcast here. So just hold on just a second. Yeah, that's some good ASMR. I think that's what you kids call it. Kids, please drink responsibly, even if it's a non-alcoholic beverage. Yeah, that's good stuff. But yeah, look, as you guys know, if you've listened to pretty much any episode of the Far Out podcast, I'm a huge nerd. I'm a huge, sci-fi nerd, comic book nerd. I have legitimate comics in my collection. I'm still that kind of guy where I still go and I buy legitimate comic books. Not always. They really have to, you know, really grab me, so to speak. I love all the characters. I mean, I love Superman, Batman, Spider-Man, Captain America. Doesn't mean I'm necessarily lining up to get their comics. I have to really be in the mood to get a comic of a character, and it has to be a good story. But for me, the biggest thing that drives me to or to not get a comic is actually the art. For me, it's the art. It has to be appealing to my eyes, and I don't want it to be too jarring or too goofy. And but Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow was kind of one that I frankly just dove in on, despite me not doing a whole lot of research about it. Like, yeah, when I found it at one of my local comic book stores, I believe I got this one at Paradox in Fargo. Shout out to them. I believe it was them. I went to a couple looking for Woman of Tomorrow when the movie was announced, and funny enough, it was sold out as I did my sweep across my great city here. So I know this one was flying off the shelves because there were people just like me who wanted to get the quote unquote source material for the movie. But I digress. Anyway, when I finally found a copy, I went to my comic book store to, with the intent to buy it, and unless I found the art to just be just horrendous, in my opinion, I was going to get it, and thankfully I found the art to be passable just as I thumbed through it there, in the store, and I bought it. And as I said, I just kind of continued to thumb through it over the course of this last year. And I told myself I'm going to read it at some point. I got to make sure I read it before the movie comes out, because I want to have a good foundation for what the movie might be. And it just sat and it sat and it sat on my shelf, and finally I decided, okay, I'm going to read this thing like an actual book, cover to cover. Let's dive in. And I'll say this, the Woman of Tomorrow miniseries, the actual comic that this movie is based on, I do like this book. I think it's very strong in a lot of different ways. I think it has a good sense of, frankly, morals, themes, tones. There are life lessons to be shared throughout this book, which is pretty cool. It does get a little goofy in its comic book just delivery system. They interject some stuff in there that might have a hard time, you know, getting involved with and stuff like that. Just for an example, this is a minor spoiler for the Woman of Tomorrow comic book, and I don't think it's going to translate to the movie, but it might. But in the comic, for example, Supergirl rides a magical horse, essentially. Not the whole time, but near the end, when she literally needs to get somewhere fast, she needs to get somewhere faster than even she could fly, and so she has this super horse, as it's called. Again, for some people that might be too much, but Crypto the super dog is in the Supergirl movie. It's all she. Excuse me. Crypto the super dog is also in the comic book, and Crypto the super dog was in the Superman movie. So if you can get behind Crypto the super dog, odds are you can get behind this super horse, which, funny enough, doesn't have a name in the comic. And I literally, just before I got on the mic here to record this segment, I just finished the comic. So it's very fresh in my mind, which is why I want to talk about that right off the bat. Yeah, unless I completely missed it, the super horse does not have a name. So, whatever. So that's just an example of something that I don't think will be in the movie, because I actually just watched all the trailers for the movie just before I got on the mic as well. So this is all really, really fresh in my mind. I don't think that's going to translate. So yeah, in terms of it being too weird for non-comic book fans to get into this actual story, I think this one is mostly palatable from a delivery system method. And I do think that the story is good in some places, great in other places, and then downright not good in others. Dare I even say bad? Funny enough, regarding the comic, I really enjoyed the beginning, really enjoyed the middle. I did not like the ending. I did not like the ending. And the way that, excuse me, excuse me, I just burped. The way that my comic book collection here for Woman of Tomorrow is connected, the way it's comprised of, it literally has it broken up into chapters. So, you can read, 15 pages in it. This is chapter 1. Then you get on to, the next 20 pages. That's chapter 2. You're essentially reading issue 1, issue 2 through issue 8. And so for myself, issue 7 and 8, the final 2 of the miniseries, I think that's where the story kind of lost itself for me. But the majority of it, about 75% of it, even maybe a little more, I really enjoyed. And if this book is indicative of what's going to come in the actual movie, I think we're in for a real treat. And also, again, just speaking of the context of the movie, I watched the 3 main trailers for the movie just before I got on the mic, just before what you're listening to right now. I actually wasn't going to watch the 3rd trailer just because I didn't want to have any more spoilers for the movie. I still wanted a sense of freedom going into the movie, but I thought, I did just read the comic, and this is based on that comic, and there is a new trailer out there, and it would provide more fire for this conversation piece I want to do on the podcast. So I'll watch the 3rd trailer, and then I thought, well, why don't I just rewatch them all? So I did, and I'll say this: throughout the 3 trailers, there are some like literal direct lifts from the comic. I'm talking like down to like the words spoken in the trailers are the same that's written on the page. Then there's stuff that's in the trailers that is not anywhere present in the comic. For example, there are some direct quotes about the fall of Krypton, because the past of Supergirl is explored in the comic. Not in depth, but they reiterate that as Supergirl is helping this girl throughout the comic, and that's really the story. The main premise, I don't mean to bury the lead here, but the main premise of both the comic and the movie, from what I can surmise, is that there's a woman named Ruth, or Ruth A. She witnesses her father getting killed by some mercenary known as Krem of the Yellow Hills, and she is just a girl who has great determination, but not a lot of resources when it comes to hunting down this mercenary. And she collides with Supergirl, and together they share a common enemy in Krem, because Krem ends up injuring Krypto. And so they are both pursuing the same person, just for different reasons. That's the story of the comic, and it appears to be the same story or similar-ish story of the movie, because we see Krypto get injured in the trailers, and we see the death of Ruth's father in the trailers as well. So that's another similarity. And the discussion about as the characters are sharing their grief to one another, because they're literally traveling across an ocean of stars to find Krem. He's on the run now, and all that stuff. Ruth is talking about how much her father meant to her, and all that. And then Supergirl essentially says, well, same here, girlfriend. I lost my entire planet, so I know what it's like to go through loss. Not that it's necessarily a competition, but they both bond over that, both again in terms of the comic and in terms of the movie. And we see flashbacks in the movie of what Krypton's going to look like, and what its destruction looks like, which is pretty cool. On top of that, we also see that there's Superman in the movie, because he is shown in a couple of trailers. Not sure what role he'll play specifically. I doubt he's in it very much, but we know that he actually has a presence. David Cornsweet did film scenes as Superman for the upcoming Supergirl movie. In the comic, Superman is only mentioned, but he's never shown. And that's something that is different. And also, I'd say the biggest difference, apart from just like visual stuff, because like Krem in the movie, the villain in the movie looks nothing like Krem from the comic. In fact, I actually think the comic did it better. In the comic, Krem of the Yellow Hills more so looks like just kind of like a Viking, more so like a really buff human. Whereas in the movie, he looks more like an actual monster. Like his face is kind of deformed, and it looks like he honestly has like yellow skin. So maybe they're taking the yellow Krem of the Yellow Hills. Perhaps they're taking the title yellow into a literal context. Who knows? But I digress. But the biggest difference, though, is that in the movie, there is the supervillain known as Lobo, played by Jason Momoa. In the comic, Lobo is not present. He's not even mentioned. So, I'm not saying that's a bad thing that, they're bringing in an entirely different character into this adaptation of the story. Not at all. I like the character of Lobo. I know a little bit about him. He's kind of he's almost like the DC version of Deadpool in some ways, like very hard to kill, loves to just kind of go on a rampage, and is pretty abrasive and can be funny as well. But and I like Jason Momoa too, as an actor. So I think he will be a good addition to the movie. It's just he's not in the original story. So I find that funny, or I find it not funny, because funny sounds kind of diminutive. I find it interesting that in the trailers there are direct dialogue lifts from the comic, word per word, about the fall of Krypton, about Supergirl, stuff like that. And then there are these additions and stuff and changes that aren't in the comic, at all. Though I do believe that there are some scenes in the trailers that are pulled from the comic as well. I'm not going to spoil the comic, in minute fashion. I'm going to speak more so in a broader context on this, because again, the movie was initially, created as, I think, meant to be more so a direct adaptation of this original comic. And if that happens to be more so the case than not, then I'm not going to give away these huge spoilers. But the story of Woman of Tomorrow goes across several planets. It actually takes it goes across like several months, which is pretty nuts. So it's going to be interesting to see how they condense the story from months inside of a book into just 2 hours inside of a movie. How are they going to convey that passage of time? And on some of the planets, there are some really crazy, sad things that happen. I'm not going to say that the book brought a tear to my eye, but it definitely makes you feel. They don't pull punches in a few areas, so I'm wondering how that will translate to the movie. I wonder if the movie will show the atrocities, the true atrocities that the book represents. Excuse me, just had to take a drink, and just for example, just to give you a little bit of context for what I'm talking about. In the comic book, it talks about how Supergirl is coming across these ruins with Ruth as they travel the stars, and they're finding the remains of entire species of aliens and whatnot, and the loss of these alien species. In the book, they literally use the words genocide and Holocaust. So very, very, relatable, applicable words to, what we've dealt with throughout human history. So just the use of this certain kind of vernacular in the book, every now and then it can just kind of make your heart drop, because it gives a deeper context for what the authors of the book are trying to describe. So, again, will the movie touch on those aspects? I'm not sure. But as I watched the trailers, I thought that looks similar. I think that looks like that. That could be that, just a little different. So I don't know. But the story of Woman of Tomorrow is one of hope. It's one of pursuit. It's one of vengeance, and trying to figure out if revenge is the best method for, handling, your issues, dealing with your grief. And, even in the second trailer, it's not even said in a piece of dialogue. It's actually said throughout the trailer music that they have attached to the second trailer, which I think is the best one. The song choice has the lyric line of "What becomes of the brokenhearted," and I mean, that is, whoever decided on the trailer music for that second Supergirl trailer, they hit the bullseye with Supergirl, because that's a constant theme throughout the story. What does Ruth do when she saw her father get killed and she knows that his killer's still out there? What does Supergirl do when her entire civilization has been destroyed and she comes across this person who is on this vengeance quest? Oh, and by the way, the same guy that killed her father injured Crypto the Superdog, who, is literally one of the last remaining Kryptonian creatures alive. Because again, Krypton was destroyed. So Supergirl, the Kryptonians, that entire biology, they're an endangered species. So So both Ruth and Supergirl are fueled by vengeance to a degree. But throughout the course of the comic, Supergirl is this beacon of hope, is this steadiness, is this rock for Ruth to lean on. And so I hope that the movie conveys that as well. Again, the ending notwithstanding, I didn't care for the ending, but overall, the story I think is strong. I think it's entertaining, and I think that the art is the coolest portion of the comic. I really enjoyed the art. It's beautifully drawn, lots of color, lots of great splash pages, just stuff that just makes you just look at it and wonder. It really is a graphic novel in the same way that as you're reading a novel, you create pictures in your head of what you're reading to help give yourself context for the story. The comic just does that in really great fashion. I really enjoyed looking at what I was reading, what was being portrayed. So if the movie can capture that same sense of tone via colors, I think that'll be great. As I say that, it doesn't look like that's going to happen because throughout the trailers, the color palette is quite muted. There's a lot of browns and blacks and grays and stuff like that, whereas the comic, you have orange and red and pink and yellow and green and blue and purple. You have the whole color spectrum on display, because they're literally going across space and time. They're showing the vastness of the galaxy. So again, the movie has to try to capture that in the best way that it can. Hopefully, the trailers are just showing more so a specific section of the story. Again, there are bits from the trailers that I'm like, I think this is what that is in the story. And if that is the case, if the trailers are highlighting a specific section, we're really only seeing a third of the story. And if this is correct, that third of the story that they're continuing to show shots of does lend itself to more of a diluted color palette. Not completely, but there are some bits where you could think, okay, like, yeah, this planet is more dirt-based and there's clouds, or smoke, there's stuff like that. I hope that I'm right. I hope that the trailers are just practicing restraint when it comes to showing the whole movie, but with movie trailers, you can pretty much get a sense of the beginning, middle, and end because trailers love to give away the whole gosh darn thing nowadays. So, yeah, while the movie might adapt the story both directly and indirectly, I think it's going to sadly leave the literal colors behind, which is a bummer because Supergirl, Woman of Tomorrow as a comic book is a really interesting book to look at. Let's hope the movie can live up to that, so to speak. So yeah, it's interesting what they're choosing to take from the source material and what they're seemingly choosing to not take, so to speak, and these quasi unnecessary additions like the introduction of a Lobo and whatnot, which again, going back to him, if you know the history of that character at all, that he's not a one and done. There's a reason why you get someone like Jason Momoa. He can be a persistent character, so on and so forth. So, I digress. Hopefully the additions that they choose to make to the movie lead to good things because the book can get a little long in the tooth, but I think ultimately the movie itself is going to be relatively tight, and I think that's good. I'm hopeful at the end of the day that this is going to be a pretty solid adaptation of what I think is a pretty great book overall. And it's interesting to look at Supergirl, the movie, in comparison to Superman, which came out in 2025. Superman was based on a bunch of different Superman comics, but one that I heard talked about over and over again, I think, was All-Star Superman. I think that was the title of it, which is another miniseries, another collection of comics that's just compiled into one book. And I picked that one up too, to read prior to the Superman movie coming out for a very similar reason, as to how I, read Woman of Tomorrow for Supergirl. And I didn't like the All-Star Superman comic. That one got too weird for me. The art was too weird for me. I didn't like it, and when I went to see the Superman movie, I liked it but didn't love it. Superman was my most anticipated movie of 2025. As you know, over the course of the podcast, I dedicated several episodes to talking about it. I was all in on it. I got the merch. I was looking at all the pictures. I got the freaking Dairy Queen meal because I was all in on this stuff. Because I'm all in the bag on the superhero stuff. I really am because I love watching these movies with my mom in particular. Shout out to my mom if you're listening. I know that you are. Hi, Mom. I'm looking forward to seeing Supergirl with you when that comes out, in theaters and all that stuff. So, it's interesting how I didn't love the Superman comic or comics that the movie was based on, and then that kind of more so translated to the movie, me liking it, not loving it. I ended up seeing it twice, but I digress. With Supergirl, I like the comic book more, so hopefully that means I will like the movie more because, again, this movie is said to be a more so direct adaptation of one singular story as opposed to a collection of stories like the Superman movie. But now let's talk some things that are a little more concrete as opposed to what may or may not be loose adaptations. When it came to the Superman movie, there was all this talk about its budget. How much does it cost? How much does it need to make to succeed? Well, we might never know specifics for some of these things, but we might have a relatively narrow ballpark to operate in when it comes to this stuff. Per the Google, Superman 2025 had a budget of 225 million. I heard it was a little less. I heard it was just 200 even. But again, according to Google, at 225, let's run with that. I'm of the mindset that for a movie to be a quote unquote success, a movie needs to make 3 times its budget to be in the green when it comes to balancing the checkbooks of the studios. This is also up to interpretation. I've heard that movies need to make twice their budget to be considered a quote unquote, profitable thing. I've heard it needs to be much higher, that it needs to be 4 times the budget. For myself and my understanding of filmmaking, a good rule of thumb is to operate under the budget and just times it by 3, because that covers the production budget, that covers the marketing budget, and then that covers the theater cut as well, with some wiggle room in there for all of those things. Because again, none of those metrics might be concrete. But, there are some instances where a movie will spend more on marketing than it will on the literal money it spent to make the actual picture itself. For example, Barbie from 2022, 2023, Barbie with Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling, that movie spent more money on marketing than it did for its actual budget. They put more into making sure it was on billboards, TV, YouTube, and whatnot than they did into actually building the sets, hiring the actors, so on and so forth. Same with Avengers Endgame. That movie spent more marketing than I think it did actually, putting stuff on film. Don't quote me exactly on Endgame, because I think Infinity War and Endgame were kind of considered like one movie, even though they're 2 and whatnot, but I digress. That Barbie one is 100% accurate. That Barbie one is 100% accurate, that there was more money put into the promotional campaign than there was for the actual budget. So, a movie can have, say, $100 million budget. They might spend 125 on the marketing. The inverse can be said as well. A movie might have a budget of 100 million. They might only spend 50 million on marketing. So there's some wiggle room depending on how hard a studio wants to push a movie. In terms of Superman, they pushed that thing really hard. So I think that, averaging its production budget with its marketing budget of around 200 million, I think is good. And I think the same can be said for Supergirl as well. And then on top of that, you have to remember that the theaters, literally globally, all the movie theaters, from AMC down to the mom and pop shops who run the movie, they get a cut. And the global average for theaters, the money that they get back in tickets is roughly 1/3 of the box office. Roughly 1/3. So if a movie comes out and it makes $300 million, around $100 million will be split amongst all the theaters globally that showed the movie. So, but again, that's up to some changes as well, depending on how long the movie is in theaters, what contracts exist, so on and so forth. Again, there are complicated mathematical problems you can do to try to figure out when a movie is quote unquote successful. For myself, for a quick rule of thumb, I just think that finding the production budget or finding a relatively close production budget for a movie and timesing it by 3 is more so a good way to find the ceiling number that a movie needs to hit. So in terms of Superman, if we take the reported budget of 225 and times that by 3, we get 675. And also, budget, the global haul for Superman, the global box office for Superman is at 618 million. So by my simple math of timesing a budget by 3, Superman might have lost some money. But in the aftermath, since the movie's come out and since the year plus has gone on, I've heard reports from DC Studios that no, of course not. The movie absolutely made money. Now, you can take that with a grain of salt because, why would a company come out and say that their flagship, starting movie, why would they say that their premiere thing, quote unquote, failed financially? They could flat out be lying. I don't know. But again, if Superman didn't outright make money in the theaters, they have certainly made it in the back end now with merchandise, DVD sales, rentals, so on and so forth. So around again, the somewhere between the 600 to 700 million Superman needed to make to become quote unquote profitable. And it did fall in that scale again at 618 million, just a little on the lower side, but I digress. Who really knows what the numbers needed to be? Well, for the sake of argument, for the sake of discussion, let's now turn our heads to Supergirl, which, per the Google, has a production budget of $175 million. So, if we take 175 times 3, we come out to 525. So, assuming that this is our floor or our ceiling or whatever for Supergirl, give or take some money in either direction, can Supergirl can it make essentially 500 to say maybe 600 million at the global box office? I don't know. I do not know. I can't remember. There was an episode of the Far Out podcast I did where I had this exact same discussion about Man of Steel, the Superman movie that came out prior to Superman 2025, because both Man of Steel and Superman, I'm getting my Superman confused here. Both Man of Steel from 2013 and Superman from 2025 reportedly had a production budget of 225 million. Man of Steel went on to make 670. Superman from 2025 went on to make 618. And I remember talking about how I wish I would have done research on myself before I talked about this. I think I remember that I thought Superman in 2025 was going to make more money than Man of Steel, but not by a lot. In fact, I think, funny enough, I think that the total I said for Superman was like maybe 675, like just right on the dot what it would essentially need to make for it to become profitable. Because I felt more energy for this Superman movie as I did for Man of Steel, so I did tack on a little more. I thought Superman would make more than Man of Steel. At least I'm pretty sure that's what my theory was at the time. If that was my theory, I was wrong. Because again, if you just do some quick Googling, just like I did, you can see the numbers of what Man of Steel and Superman reportedly made. So now in the context of Supergirl, which does have a smaller budget than Superman. It does. That's a bona fide fact. The highest budget I've seen for Supergirl is like 180. I haven't the lowest I saw was like 160, the highest was 180. I haven't seen anything at 200 or over. So this movie definitely costed less than Superman from 2025. That being said, do I think the movie can make somewhere between 500 to 600 million? I don't know because Superman made just over 6. So does that mean I think Supergirl can make on the higher end of what Superman made? I'm going to be honest. I don't think so. I want to be hopeful, but I don't know, because just as I said just a few seconds ago, I felt a greater energy for the Superman movie coming out in 2025 than I did for Man of Steel. We now fast forward to 2026. I don't feel the same energy for Supergirl as I did for Superman. Just 1 year separated from 2025 to 2026. I don't feel that same energy. I'm someone who's tapped into this stuff. I love talking about this stuff on a podcast. As I just said, I bought the freaking Happy Meal at Dairy Queen when Superman came out. I have a Superman hat that I'm wearing right now, which I'm retrofitting as Supergirl because they're the same logo. But I have merchandise. I have legitimate comic books. I'm on the pulse of this stuff. Okay, and I feel that the marketing for Supergirl has been literally less than what Superman was. So does that mean it might actually need to make a little less? Maybe, because maybe they put 175 into the budget, maybe they put 150 into marketing. Who knows? My point is that I was over the moon about Superman, and I'm not over the moon about Supergirl. I'm excited. Don't get me wrong, I am excited, but I'm not at that same excitement level for Superman. I was chomping at the bit for Superman. If Superman was a 10, Supergirl is like a 7.5. Or maybe now it's an 8. It's gone up as the movie has gotten closer. It's gone up since I've read that comic, but I haven't felt the exact same energy levels that I had going into Superman in 2025. So with the energy that I'm perceiving, from Supergirl versus Superman, where do I think these numbers are going to fall? Again, going into Superman the way I did, and then coming out of it, that movie made 618. Call it 615 for easy math. Do I think Supergirl now, with me feeling a little bit of a lesser enthusiasm, do I think it can get somewhere between 500 and say the ceiling is 615? I don't know. I think if it makes over 5, I think the studios should be happy. In a perfect world, you see this trajectory go up and up and up. So you'd want Supergirl to make 630, 640, 650 compared to Superman, but I don't think it's going to get to 600 million. I would love to be wrong. I would love to see this thing hit 7. Heck, I'd love to see this thing become $1 billion movie. Do I think though it's going to get to 6? I don't know. But again, per my math of 175 times 3 is 525. So at the end of the day, do I think Supergirl can hit 525? 525. Man, that's within 100 million of Superman. No, I'm gonna say it's not gonna hit 525. I'm not. I don't mean that to cast doubt or to say doom and gloom to this movie. I think this movie will be successful. I think it's gonna be a splash in the pop culture. I think it's going to be a splash with moviegoers, and I think it could have a similar lifespan as the Superman movie did. I think that people are going to really enjoy it. They're going to get people like me who see it once, twice, maybe more, and then after it leaves cinemas, it's going to do well on DVD, rental, merchandise, stuff like that. I think Supergirl's going to do repeat business pretty much across the board, maybe just to a lesser extent. What do I think the actual financial haul will be when all is said and done of Supergirl in 2026? And that's tough to say as well, because I've seen box office tracking, and take this with a huge grain of salt. Sometimes they're right on the money, sometimes they're not at all. Pun intended, right on the money, by the way. I've seen tracking as low as 50. I've seen it as high as 80. So they're probably assuming somewhere between 65 to 70 million, which I think would be a good start. Relatively speaking, again, you'd always like to see these numbers be a little higher, but I wonder what the opening box office. I'm gonna do some real-time Googling here of Superman from 2025. Superman 2025 box office opening. Let's see here. Kids, talk amongst yourselves here while I type into Google. Okay, so per the Google, Superman opened to 125 domestically. So that's great. Do I think Supergirl is going to hit 125 in its opening? I do not. Do I think it'll hit 100 in its opening? There's a chance, but I'll say it's probably less than 30%. So where do I think Supergirl will fall in terms of its opening weekend domestically? I'm gonna say opening weekend. I'm gonna say 88. Shout out to Back to the Future. Hit that flux capacitor. I'm gonna say 88 for the opening, and I think grand total, Supergirl's gonna do. I'm gonna say between the spread of 450 to 510. That's a large spread, though. I'm gonna narrow that. I think the movie's gonna do 505. The grand total after all the pennies are accounted for, I think it's gonna do 505. Maybe I'm being too optimistic, but I want this stuff to succeed. I'm high on my own supply, so that's where I think Supergirl's going to fall. 88 million opening domestic, 505 global grand total. You heard it here first. And I think that if those numbers are both accurate, I think that the studios will be happy, even though they might maybe need a little more for it to be quote unquote profitable. But I digress. These are just fun things to talk about because I'm this much of a nerd. I love talking about the literal financial figures in movies because I love to know how movies work. I'm that kind of guy to where I don't just watch movies. I read about them. I watch stuff about the making of. That's why I still That's why I still buy Blu-rays so I can watch all the amazing behind the scenes stuff. The making of documentaries, cast interviews, concept stuff like that. I'm all in on filmmaking, and so I love this kind of stuff. So yeah, I do think Supergirl will be successful. I don't know if it'll be as successful as Superman. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope that it, just is this moonshot of a movie. I hope it, again, goes on to make even more money than Superman. It's even more successful. I frankly hope Supergirl is just a better movie overall, because Superman 2025, I was so ready to love that movie. I was so ready to see that thing 2, 3, 4, 5 times in the theaters. I thought for a second that Superman might be the new movie to set my personal record of times I've seen a movie in theaters, which is 6, and that is set by the original Deadpool in 2016. So for 10 years, one movie has held that record, and it's not been broken yet. There's been a few close ones. Top Gun Maverick, I got to 5. Avatar, The Way of Water, I got to 5. Funny enough, Solo, A Star Wars Story, I think was either 4 or 5. I think Suicide Squad 2016 might have also been. No, Suicide Squad was 2017, I think. The original Suicide Squad, I think, was either 4 or 5. So I'm that guy where I'll see movies 2, 3, 4, 5 times in the theaters if I like it enough. The Suicide Squad one, that was an anomaly because I had friends that just wanted to keep going to see it. I did not particularly love that movie, but my friends were like, "You want to go see it?" And it's like, "Yeah, of course. Who doesn't love to see movies with friends?" So it's like I kept going with them. So there you go. Those numbers are a little inflated, but I digress. So no movie has tied or surpassed Deadpool. One will eventually because I want one to eventually do that. And I thought Superman was going to be the one to do it. And I left that theater thinking it's good, not great. And ended up seeing it twice. Just twice. After all that hype. I just saw it twice. I've seen it since then, like on HBO Max, and I think it's good. It's aged well, in my opinion. But how will Supergirl do? Will I see it 2 times? Will I see it 3 times? Or will I see it, the coveted 7th time? Will it set the new record? Who knows? I don't know. But I will say I like the trailers. The more I see from the movie, the more I like. I thought that the first trailer was good. Thought the second trailer was better. I thought that was the best one. I thought the third one was just slightly a step down. So, if the first trailer is like a 7, trailer 2 is a 9, trailer 3 was like an 8. None of them have been bad. I'm just saying that the second one was my favorite. Kind of similar to their poster game as well. I think that their first couple of posters were really cool and fun. And I like the shot of her, in the trench coat, because that's what we saw her, when she made her debut in 2025 Superman. She was wearing that trench coat when she had that cameo. So I like that poster for her. And then some other posters I'm not a real big fan of, but there are a new bevy of posters that have come out since then. There's the IMAX one, which is, good. That's a good one. There's the real 3D one. Not a fan of that one so much. I'm not really a fan of 3D overall, but whatever. There's the 4DX one. Again, not really a fan of 4DX either, but I like this image. This shot of her kind of doing the quote unquote superhero landing pose, where she's in that crouch with her fist pressed down into the earth there. That's its own isolated poster. They just added a cool background for this 4DX one, which I think is a nice addition because I'm not a big fan of the solo poster shot of her just doing the superhero landing. But whatever. Then they have the Dolby Cinema one, which is very cool. It kind of takes what I'm talking about, just amplifies it. Where like it's got the cool factor of her in the trench coat with this sense of color. And so hopefully this Dolby poster is indicative of what's to come in terms of the color palette. Because I think if they were to completely wash out of the color on the Supergirl movie, I think that would be a big missed opportunity, especially because the Superman movie was so gosh darn colorful. It was literally bright. It was well lit. Thank you, James Gunn. Thank you, cinematographers, for doing that because, God bless Man of Steel. God bless Zack Snyder. It looked like he shot those things through a muddy puddle. There was no color in those movies. They took out the blue from the Superman suit. They took out the red. And my gosh, Gotham looks like it's shot during an eclipse. I mean, it's freaking, it's how it was. Hence why we got such a colorful Superman in 2025. It was meant to be the direct inverse of what we had previously got from 2013 onward. But I digress. So I don't want Supergirl to lose that sense of tone, that sense of color, that fluffiness that Superman brought to the table, because while I didn't love the movie, I loved the tone of Superman. I loved the popcorn nature to it, the true family feel to the movies. Like my mom never saw Batman versus Superman, at least not to my knowledge. I don't think she's ever seen it. And she certainly did not see it with me in the theaters. Again, which is rare because we go to all the superhero stuff together, which is why I like it so much. It's something that her and I do together literally every couple of months. She didn't want to see Batman vs. Superman. She thought it's too dark. And she was right. That movie was dark tonally, and that movie was dark literally. Again, looks like it was shot through a muddy puddle. Here comes Superman in 2025, and it's got color and it's bright, and you can you can see everything. And she really enjoyed it. She saw it with me, because it had more of a family fun tone to it. Whereas Batman vs. Superman was so dark and so serious and all that stuff. And I'm not saying that every superhero thing needs to be light and fluffy and popcorn fun, but this stuff these are superheroes. I mean, what are we talking about here? Like this stuff is for they're action figures, they're for kids and, teenagers or adults like myself who grew up with this stuff and, still enjoy it to this day, but then I also, present to you the Dark Knight trilogy. Those things are incredibly serious and they're some of the best ones to be ever made. Same with Logan, that Wolverine movie. That thing is shot like a Western. It's very serious in nature and it also has an R rating. So there is a place for more serious superhero fare. But I gotta be honest, the nature of 2025 Superman was so refreshing from so many different angles, and so I don't want that to be lost on the Supergirl movie. I want it to still feel fresh and refreshing, in terms of its story and color palette and all of that stuff. I think it will. I am optimistic about the movie, and as I've said, I haven't been really looking forward to it over the last couple of months, but these last couple of weeks, knowing how close it is, I am looking forward to it. I do think that there is this kind of slower-ish ramp up to the movie. It's not having the same oomph that the 2025 Superman did, but they are hitting some similar beats. As I've said earlier in this segment, there was the Dairy Queen meal for Superman. Well, now at KFC, there is the Supergirl meal, so I like that they're doing stuff like this. I like the broad approach to it all. I like the fact that you can now get Superman and Supergirl, in toys, in toothbrushes, in your food. I like that the approach that they're doing to it. Gotta be honest, though. Gotta be honest. Not the biggest KFC guy. It's not bad, but it's not a grand slam. Is it a home run? I don't know. For me, it's more like a stand-up double. But look, am I gonna get this meal? Probably. They will probably get my money the same way Dairy Queen did. I bet KFC will as well. Just because I'm in the bag, man. You put the DC or Marvel logo and a cape on something, take my money. Same with Star Wars and Halo. That's how they get me. Brand recognition. There you go. Marketing 101. So, yeah, look, I am looking forward to the Supergirl movie. I just touched the mic. I'm not sure if it's going to do the same bang up numbers that Superman did. But did Superman even do bang up numbers? I don't know. Again, depends on what kind of math you're using. For Superman, I described the ramp up to that as the summer of Superman, because that's honestly what it felt like from April, May to the release of that movie in July. That thing felt like the summer of Superman. That felt like the movie to see, the thing to keep your eye on. Again, hence why I devoted so much of the podcast to covering Superman. And take a drink here. And, when I did my yearly, episode of the podcast marking a year in the book, I talked so much about how thankful I was for Superman to come out when it did, because it gave me just constant stuff to talk about in terms of the podcast when the podcast was still so new, when it was in its infancy. And Supergirl has done that too, but I'm not talking about Supergirl nearly as much as I talked about Superman. And so, is this the summer of Supergirl? Yes, it is. But the summer of Superman was a scorcher. That was high 80s, low 90s every day. The summer of Supergirl, a little on the cooler side. We're talking middle 70s, higher 80s. But for some people, that's more comfortable. So, your mileage may vary. But yeah, this is the summer of Supergirl, and I'm here for it. I'm all about it. And the movie comes out in less than 3 weeks, just slightly over 2, when this episode is getting recorded. And so yeah, whether you find this episode before or after you watch the movie, thank you for watching, and thank you for listening to my coverage of Supergirl. Thank you for watching and for listening just to this entire thing, fully. I appreciate all my listeners, all my viewers, all my engagement. I really do appreciate it. And so yeah, I hope you've enjoyed this examination of all this stuff. And yeah, in terms of DC stuff, I'm all in, man. I'm all in. I'm all in on this new universe, from the movies to the shows to the video games to whatnot. I won't like everything. I know that. Some stuff I will like more than others. Some stuff I will outright love. Some stuff I will outright dislike. But to all the fans out there who are like myself, who are really looking forward to all this new storytelling, but they're not really sure what to make of it all, just go in with an open mind. Just try to at least. I know that that's difficult, especially for people like us who maybe read comics and know the backstory inside and out. Superman has an actual Kryptonian name. His name is Kal-El. Well, Kara is, I just gave it away. Supergirl is Kara Zor-El. I know their alter names. Like Batman is Bruce Wayne. Spoiler. Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Spoiler. Do you know the alter names to heroes? I don't know. Maybe some people do, maybe some people don't. I do, because I'm that kind of guy. So if you're like me, who knows these things inside and out, and are so looking forward to it and are so passionate about it, don't let the flame die out, to quote Plankton. That's a SpongeBob reference. Keep that passion alive. But just if you can, just maybe simmer the expectations by 15%, because then that way you can go and you can have your expectations blown out of the water. And that was part of my own issue with Superman, was that my expectations were so gosh darn high, sky high, as it were, that the movie just couldn't possibly meet them, because I was expecting to get a 12 out of 10, and I got a 7.5 to an 8 out of 10. a still really good score. Just didn't meet my expectations. So if you're like me, kids, if you're listening, and I know that you are, take your expectations, drop it down by 20%, 2 points, 2 points. That way, when you go see Supergirl later this month in June, your expectations will not only be met, but also succeeded. And what could be better? Anyway, thank you so much for watching and for listening to the Far Out podcast. Lots of cool stuff to watch, to consume in terms of movies, books, video games, all that stuff. And also in delicious tie-in meals, the new Supergirl meal available at KFC, So yeah, lots of cool stuff to just get your hands on if you're passionate about pop culture and stuff like that. So again, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. And I'll see you in the movies. And I'll see you on the next episode of the Far Out Podcast. All right. Bye-bye.